Hello and welcome to another episode of Dog Day Chess.
Hi.
In this episode, we're going to look at a game that I played which shows the importance of activating your pieces. And in this game, I played white. So I started with my usual e4 move, and black answered with e6. Now, I follow the rule that if I can take a full center, I will do so in the opening. So I bring my d pawn up to d4. I've got a full pawn center. And black answers somewhat surprisingly by bringing the queen out. That queen is attacking my e4 pawn, so I have to defend it with the knight. And then he comes out and he pins my knight to my king, so my knight is not really defending that pawn anymore. So I need to bring in another defender or do something about that. So I develop my bishop to defend the pawn. And he counters by moving his c-pawn. So now I protect that pawn, and I'm counterattacking the queen. I don't really like her out in my area so soon. And black responds by moving his queen, somewhat pinning my knight. It's in the same line of attack. The queens would be face to face. If the knight does move, that's true.
Yeah.
She is attacking the g2 pawn, though. So I take care of that simply by castling. And we trade off the pawns. And black moves the queen again. This is the third time he's moved the queen in the opening, which means, as we've seen in previous episodes, I've got a pretty big lead in development. So I continue by bringing my knight back to a place where it's protected, and doing so with tempo, because that attacks the queen, forcing her to move again. Then I bring my bishop out to support my knight. If black should decide to trade the minor pieces, I'd rather not double up my pawns. And then he moves his bishop back, putting a little more pressure on this h2 square, which has the queen and the bishop attacking it, and at this point the knight is defending it along with the king. Safe at the moment, but I do have to watch out for that. So I proceed by bringing my knight in a more aggressive position. I'm eyeing this c7 forking square, forking the king and the rook, but really, with this move, I'm actually guaranteed to win the bishop pair. In other words, I'm guaranteed to be able to trade off my knight for his bishop, because if you look at the situation here, his bishop can't move to any safe place along this diagonal without getting traded off. They're all covered off by one of my pieces, and if he moves off of this diagonal, then he leaves this forking square available for me to occupy. So the way black responded was by bringing his queen out here to defend the bishop. Now I could just capture the bishop, trade off my knight for the bishop, and win the pair, but I thought if I could just shake that queen away from the protection of the bishop, I might be able to win the bishop outright. So I bring my bishop to attack the queen. She falls back a square. Then I bring my other knight to attack the queen, coordinating my knights. And the queen moves back here to the c5 square, which is a dubious place for her because now she's in line with my bishop. And now she's setting herself up for a discovered attack. Alright, so it's exactly what I do. I capture this pawn here, and that's a discovered attack on the queen. So the queen has to move to safety, and this allows me to capture this pawn here on g7 with check. Now the nice thing about that is it forces the black king to move so that he won't be able to castle. So the king moves, and then my knight falls back to this nice little outpost. We talked about outposts in previous episode, but it's a nice outpost because it can't be attacked by enemy pawns. So the bishop comes off to moves on to the big diagonal here. Now he's attacking my b2 pawn and also my a1 rook kind of by x-ray. So my first instinct was to protect that pawn. But then, because I didn't want it to be captured and then subsequently my rook be in danger, but I did something that was completely opposite of that, and I'll show you why. Instead, I actually moved my pawn up out of the way, leaving my rook for the bishop to capture. Now, why did I do that? Can you see a reason why I did that?
I think you did that to give you like an outpost to your bishop.
Well, actually, moving the pawn up there does give a nice place for my bishop. That is true. That's part of the reason why I moved the pawn to that location. But why I left my rook on pre, or apparently on pre, is because if black did respond by capturing the rook, we can look at that situation, then I could capture the bishop back with the queen, and I've got a nice attack on the black rook. So between my queen and my dark squared bishop, I'd be able to win the black rook, and I'd come out ahead a bishop out of that exchange. So that's why I did that. Now black didn't fall for that. We'll go back to the pawn push. Instead, black answered with moving a better answer, really moving the knight out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you're right. Then I made use of that outpost that I created. Not technically not an outpost, but a nice little place for my bishop, checking the king. King moves again. Now I bring my knight out to check again. This forks the bishop and the king. And we trade off. So I really just swapped my one knight for the other knight, and black is still in the same dilemma. Now, black really has a couple of options here. One option is he can move his king to d8. But then what that allows me to do is to fork the rook and the king. The other option, which is what happened in the game, is he moved his king over to f8, or he could have moved it to e7. It wouldn't have made a difference, because
that's
here,
still a bad move.
That's still a bad move. He's setting himself up for a discovered attack, a discovered check. So with that, I'm able to win the bishop for free because of the discovered check that I did on the king. So as you can see, my pieces are very active. My bishops are on these nice active squares. My knight is way up into black's territory. So, and my king is castled. So it's a pretty good situation to be in. So the king comes back, forward rather, and he's actually attacking my knight with his rook now by that move. So I bring my knight to a safer place, and this is done with tempo. It's actually attacking the queen at that moment. And then back to this nice little outpost.
Both checking him.
Yeah. So my knight stays there for a little while because that's a useful place for it, as you'll see. The king comes out towards my knight, and now I would like to bring my queen out to this square, perhaps ultimately to that's g4, perhaps ultimately to h5. The problem is that the black knight is controlling these squares. It's preventing my queen from moving out. So what I do now is I bring my bishop to attack the knight. The knight's actually pinned to the rook, so the exchange can be forced. And black responds by bringing his knight to a better position, connecting his rooks, and at which point I exchange off that knight. And that, before I move my queen out, I do need to defend the b4 pawn from the knight. So I push my a pawn up, and then black brings his rook out to the open file. He's eyeing my king, and then I bring the queen out. I'm attacking this pawn here. So black counters by bringing his knight out to help with the situation around his king. But from here, I bring my king down to check.
Yeah.
Now,
queen.
If you look at this situation, black doesn't have very many good options. Okay? So if, for example, he responds by moving his king over to e6, then queen to e7 is checkmate.
Yes.
Again, making kind of a hookmate, making use of that knight in that wonderful position for the mate. If we go back for a moment and instead the king moves to g6, then again that's still checkmate. My queen moves up again with coordinating my queen with my knight. I get a checkmate here on h6. So black makes really the only move he can make to not lose, which is to block the check with the rook, which pins the rook to the king. So When a piece is pinned, if I can, I attack it again.
Yes.
And I do that by pushing my pawn. This is attacking the rook, but it's a fork as well, really.
We're gonna win.
And so I'm going to win the rook. He brings his other rook out to help in the defense, and so I capture that rook, and he swaps it out with the other rook, which is pinned again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I move my queen over here. I'm setting up another discovered attack on the king, but I'm also pinning the knight to the queen. And the queen moves over, checking my king. Now I could just move my king over to h1, but actually, because I'm ahead in material, I want to invite simplification. So I offer a trade of queen because that'll be to my advantage going forward. So black declines the simplification, which is probably a good choice for him. But where that does leave him is now he's set up for a discovered check on the F file.
Yeah.
Because what I do is I move my knight out with the discovered check on the king by the rook. But by moving my knight out to this location, my knight is covering off or cutting off these two squares. So it's leaving the rook attacked by the queen, and the king can't stay near the rook to protect it. The king either has to abandon the rook, or the only other option, which is what happened in the game, is the rook has to block the check, only to be lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that knight again in that outpost is really working out for me. So I capture the rook with check, and then again I move my queen onto the same file as the rook, which is pinning the knight. So at this point I've got two of my pieces attacking that black knight. Black has two pieces defending the knight, so the balance of power is even. I was planning on bringing my knight in to be a third attacker for that knight. But what happened was the queen moved off and checked me. I moved to safety, and then the queen moved here to d4. But that's just a one-move attack. It doesn't really, it's not really a threat. I can just move my rook to safety. In fact, it kind of pushed me to move my rook to a better position anyway, forming this strong battery on the f file. So black moves his knight up here, and we trade off our knights. And then I proceed to use my battery, and I check again, and the king falls in the corner, and now there's a mate in one. So if you want to pause the video for a moment, see if you can find it, go right ahead. Okay, so do you see the mate in one?
Yeah.
Where is it?
It's queen to b8.
Right on. Queen to b8, checkmate. So that was it. I think this game is a good example of how important it is to get your pieces activated and get your knights to a nice outpost. The opening, I think, is where things started to go, where black started to fall behind. Moving his queen 3, even 4 times in the opening is a bad sign in itself. And I was able to use that lead in development and keep it through the whole game, and it increased the advantage as things went on. So as always, I hope you learned something from this episode, and thanks for watching.
Bye.